The following is a Cruizers Motorsports exclusive.
1983's Stroker Race was one of numerous car-based films that paired the superstar Burt Reynolds with longtime friend and director Hal Needham. Working with their formulaic slapstick comedy style and revolving around cars, they inadvertently captured NASCAR in one of its most popular and most bravado eras. From an all-star-studded NASCAR cast to a wildly inappropriate scene for modern audiences, these are 10 things you didn't know about Stroker Race. Stand on It. Stand on It was a book written in 1973 by Bill Neely and Bob Otten, both authors writing it from the perspective of their fictional character Stroker Ace, who is also credited as said author. The book, apparently, was a gritty look into Stroker Ace's world in professional racing and was the basis for the Stroker Ace feature film. Originally, First Artist Productions acquired the rights to the film, with actor Paul Newman in mind for the role.
You got a lot of stuff, kid.
Thanks, Doc.
Of course, when producer Walter Wood got a hold of it, there was a dramatic shift from gritty to light comedy in tone, the racing taking a back seat to the comedic elements. What a different movie this would have been if it had been a Paul Newman film. Budget cuts. Stroker Race was made on a budget of $30 million. How much of that was offset by sponsorships could be anybody's guess, because Universal Studios paid a lot of the NASCAR team regulars with vouchers. A guarantee of 30 seconds worth of advertisement placing in a Burt Reynolds movie, be it that movie or a feature film. It was up to the individuals that they hired to sell this voucher for whatever they could get out of it. Hence the involvement of 4-Star Whiskey and 7-Eleven. Not all the vouchers, though, were claimed, so not all of the NASCAR mechanics and B-Unit NASCAR-related people could do much with this voucher, meaning they probably worked for free. Also alleviating the budget was the fact that Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham owned a NASCAR Cup team at the time, being the Skull Bandit team. Bandit, you guessed it, was named after the biggest movie that Hal and Burt had done up to that point, being the original Smokey and the Bandit. And speaking of sponsor deals, the Ford involvement. In the list of car-centric movies that Burt Reynolds did, all of them featured heavy involvement from one auto manufacturer or another. Both Cannonball Run movies featured GMCs, and all three Smokey and the Bandit films plus Hooper featured Pontiac, mainly the Pontiac Trans Am. Stroker Ace, however, featured Ford products, the entire movie starting off with him driving a Ford Fairmont on 3 wheels. But also featuring later in the movie was the new for 1983 Mustang convertible, the existing Mustang GT, and many other Ford models. In a plot twist, and I don't mean in the movie, producers went with Ford and not the Buicks and Pontiacs that Hal Needham actually ran on his NASCAR teams, especially not Pontiac, what with the Burt and Hal's history with the company, choosing the new for 1983 Ford Thunderbird. Speaking of which, burning the birds. Ford may have mistakenly provided 2 '83 Ford Thunderbirds to the movie's 1982 production. Will Cronkite was a do-it-all stock car builder for hire around the NASCAR scene that Universal hired to provide cars and technical support for the filming of Stroker Ace. Of course, this is after they tried to pay him in vouchers. Not being in the movie industry, he didn't know what to expect. When he got a call from Ford saying that he was going to receive 2 of the 5 new for '83 Ford Thunderbird prototypes, he was perplexed because they also insisted to have a large fire going in the yard when they arrived. According to an interview with him on the Dale Jr. podcast, the people from Ford actually made him strip these cars down of anything that was flammable, including the entire interior, and just burn it. The next day, he got a call from someone else at Ford angrily telling him that he wasn't supposed to get those Thunderbirds. Ford sent a tech to remove the fuel injection systems off the cars and replace it all with carburetors. Wait, did I just say carburetors? One of these days I'm going to learn how to talk. Because the two T-Birds were production cars and obviously couldn't keep up with the speeds of an actual race car, for Reynolds in-race scenes, they actually had to be towed behind a camera truck because it couldn't keep up with the race cars. And speaking of those race cars, Inaccurate Cars. Unlike the filming of Days of Thunder, the studio never put the movie cars on track with actual Winston Cup race cars during a real race. Instead, they opted to rent the track and then send the movie cars out 4 laps at a time. 4 laps to film the villain car, 4 laps on the hero's car, 4 laps of the T-Birds being towed, so on and so forth. This, unfortunately, causes a huge disconnect in the flick, as all the faraway footage is of actual cup races and they don't show the movie cars. Also, since the budget was cut, not all of the movie cars were up to date, some of them being the discontinued previous generation A-body cars from GM. Crash scenes were also stock footage, and some of the cars in the film were actually just stock footage from the Grand National division. Wildly inappropriate. Let's face it, 1982, it was a different time. In a cringy and what feels like a very forced scene, Lonnie Anderson's character passes out from alcohol consumption, and Reynolds' character undresses her while she's passed out. The vibes from this scene will make modern audiences skin crawl. In context with the plot, this is supposed to be a comedic beat, though sadly it comes off as just the opposite. Out of context, however, Lonnie Anderson at the time was a blooming sex symbol after her work on WKRP in Cincinnati television show. Showing all she could show was just the first step in becoming one of the biggest sex symbols of the 1980s. Also, during that period, Lonnie Anderson and Reynolds were also in a relationship and eventually married in 1987. Becoming a sex symbol in Hollywood in those days meant a gratuitous sex scene in one movie or another early in one's career. And like it or not, it's still a formula that works today. Just look at Margot Robbie's scenes in The Wolf of Wall Street and you'll understand what I'm talking about. While the scene certainly isn't done properly, it served its purpose for Anderson's career. The Marilyn Monroe moment. Can you believe this took more than one shot? On her way to becoming that 80s sex symbol, the production gave her this Marilyn Monroe moment. However, on the morning of this scene, the air hose that they used had sat out all night, accumulating a bunch of moisture inside of it. So on the first take, the air hose actually soaked her and she had to go dry off and change to do the scene over again. More than likely, much to the delight of all the gentlemen involved. All-star cast. While the racing scenes were, for the most part, not really well done, Stroker Ace as a film did include a buffet of the then NASCAR drivers, crew, and even TV announcers, including Dale Earnhardt, Kyle Petty, Tim Richmond, Neil Bonnet, Buffet Benny Parsons, Handsome Harry Gant. It also had Linda Vaughn, Miss Hersh Shifter herself, and Bubba Smith, the NFL player, amongst others. The two most weird choices, though, I think, are Jim Nabors, who is starring in a NASCAR movie, but every year went to the Indianapolis 500 to sing the Indiana song. That was strange, and so was Cassandra Peterson's cameo as her fan-favorite character Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Missing the endearment. I've often wondered if Burt and Ryan Reynolds were somehow related because both of them have made a career in Hollywood basically playing themselves. While Burt never shied away from serious roles, he knew that the Needham car-centric flicks were easy money that he didn't really have to get into character for. Because of this, he felt that he owed Hal Needham the movie Stroker Ace. And due to scheduling, he turned down what probably would have been the role of his life with a picture called Terms of Endearment. The script of which was written specifically for Reynolds, but after he turned down the role, it was given to Jack Nicholson, who in turn won an Oscar for his performance. Burt Reynolds would be minus that Oscar until his role in 1997 Boogie Nights earned him one. Ironically, Burt Reynolds loved to watch Terms of Endearment, while he loathed even being part of Boogie Nights' production. Budget and reception. Stroker Ace, as I previously mentioned, was filmed on a budget of $30 million, $5 million of which went to Reynolds himself for his performance. However, with the haste that the picture was shot in, poor editing, and an overall camp of the film, Stroker Ace flopped out at the box office with a mere gross of $13 million, and critics destroyed it. Siskel and Ebert even going as far as saying that there were episodes of Hee Haw that were more lively, funny, and sexier than that dribble.
Now this may be hard to believe, but I think our next film, Stroker Ace, is quite simply the worst movie of the year so far.
It's worse than Porky?
You figured that out.
Oddly enough, there were no tie-in products to help promote the movie either. It was the first of the Needham-Reynolds movies to flop, as the critics and public alike were tired of the formula. With Stroker Ace flopping so hard, it might explain why so many NASCAR Cup drivers shied away from making cameos in Days of Thunder a mere 7 years later. While it was poorly received, it did end up with a cult following, because a lot like Days of Thunder, it caught, albeit a poor, snapshot into the world of NASCAR and showcasing drivers away from the track, and even famous TV NASCAR commentator Ken Squire being frustrated because he didn't get the real story. To sum up Stroker Ace, it's a serious book poorly adapted into a formulaic comedy, and its failure was pretty much the demise of the car-centric movie for many years. It really only holds its cult status if you were a fan of the Needham-Reynolds formula or that specific time in NASCAR, not really contributing to the sport like Days of Thunder did. It's often forgotten in car movie lore. Alright guys, if you like this video, give it the thumbs up and tell me anything I might be missing down in the comments below. Make sure you check the description below for links to Cruizers merch and support the channel, as I have been demonetized for uploading some of these old car movies for you guys, the viewers. So don't forget to subscribe as well. Until next time, fellow cruisers.
Screw second.